The Earth was slipping away. The virus had spread fast, too fast. It started with the trees. Leaves blackened, forests withered. The soil dried and the air thinned. The atmosphere itself began to collapse as oxygen levels plummeted. What food remained poisoned those who ate it. Immune systems turned on their own bodies. Disease surged in ways no one had prepared for. Scientists called it a collapse. Civilians called it the end. But one name still carried hope: Project Gemini. Led by Dr. Stephen Ross, Project Gemini was humanity's final gamble. It wasn't just science, it was desperation. Hidden from the public, deep in the archives of ancient archaeology, were two objects never meant to be found. One was a smooth alien sphere, impossibly complex. The other, a warp engine. Both, astonishingly, were dated at 4 billion years old, long before any life on Earth ever emerged. The sphere, Stephen explained, wasn't just alien, it was life itself. It was, somehow, the seed that created Earth's biosphere. The engine, a way to bend space. Together, they represented salvation, the tools to find and prepare a new home. And they'd already found one. Using the warp engine, probes had reached a distant solar system. There, a planet showed signs of habitability, raw, untouched, waiting. Terraforming it would take years, but if successful, it could support human life. Stephen would lead the mission to prepare the new Earth. His crew included Peter Lehman, an engineer, Leona Redwood, a biologist, and David Kurtz, a medical researcher. A military unit, led by Major Ryan Connell, would ensure the mission's safety. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew. If this failed, humanity wouldn't get a second shot. As the crew loaded into the spacecraft, final checks ran around the clock. The warp engine was ready. The sphere was secured. Everything was set until Amy arrived. She pushed through the launch pad crowd, screaming Stephen's name. But the countdown was over. The rocket launched. She stood in silence, swallowed by the smoke trail left behind. Inside the ship, the crew prepared for warp. Peter and David double-checked the engine and sphere. It hummed, alive with strange patterns across its surface-like veins, pulsing under glass. Something about it felt aware. Each crew member strapped in, clutching a personal relic, a Bible, a teddy bear, a photo. They weren't just launching into space, they were diving into the unknown. The warp engine ignited. Reality folded inward. Then everything went black. No one remembered passing through. They only remembered waking up. Lights flickered, alarms were off. But outside the window was a planet, a blue planet, unmistakably Earth-like, floating in the black. But something was wrong. Star maps didn't match. The system wasn't familiar. The sky was wrong. They weren't in the designated solar system. They weren't even sure where they were at all. Stephen exploded in rage. Peter had handled the engine coordinates. Peter had signed off on the warp jump. Peter had double-checked the system. Now they were lost. And back on Earth, time was ticking out. "You're relieved of your duties," Stephen told him, fists clenched. "Until further notice." No one spoke. They didn't need to. Everyone knew what this meant. The mission had failed. Earth had been abandoned, and for what? A miscalculation? Stephen locked himself in his cabin. On a small tablet, he scrolled through photos of Amy. A memory played in his mind. The two of them lying on a rooftop talking about quantum entanglement. How particles, once connected, remain connected no matter the distance. "That's us," he told her. "Always connected, across space, across time." But connection wasn't enough now. Outside the ship, an alarm blared. An object was approaching. The crew rushed to the observation deck. What they saw made the blood drain from their faces. It was Peter, his body frozen, floating toward them. No suit, no signal, just him dead. Camera logs revealed Peter had gone into the engine airlock, alone, against orders. It looked like guilt drove him to suicide, but Leona didn't believe it. "Peter wouldn't do that," she said. "Not like this," Stephen snapped. "You want to grieve him, after what he cost us." Tensions were rising. David tried to refocus the team. He and Stephen shared a private moment, David confessing that his daughter, Rita, had died from the virus. He'd volunteered for this mission to give her death meaning, to stop the same fate from happening to others. That's when Stephen made the call. They would terraform the planet in front of them. David hesitated. Ryan objected. "We don't know what this place is," he said. "We're not here to improvise." Stephen didn't care. He had a directive and he was going to follow it. "We're here to save Earth, and this is our shot." The lander prepped for descent. Everyone boarded except for Richard, a quiet soldier who chose to remain on the mothership. As the team descended, a storm appeared from nowhere. Wind and lightning battered the lander. To survive, they dumped fuel tanks and crash-landed on the surface. Breathless, bruised, stranded. They were trapped. No way to get back to orbit. No fuel. But Stephen was already looking ahead. "We don't need to go back," he said. "This is the mission. We terraform. We build. We survive." But something was watching. Back on the mothership, Richard examined the engine airlock. The same sticky goo that had been under the sphere was here, oozing along the walls. And in the shadows, something moved. The mission hadn't just failed. It had brought something with it. The crash left them disoriented and shaken, but not broken. The crew dragged themselves from the wreckage, the alien soil crunching beneath their boots. The lander was damaged, their fuel gone. Returning to orbit was no longer an option, but Stephen saw it differently. They weren't stranded, they had arrived. This was their chance to begin. The planet, strange as it was stable enough. Terraforming could begin immediately, and they had the sphere. The others weren't so convinced. Ryan challenged Stephen's authority. "We don't even know what this place is," he said. "We don't know what's out there." Stephen pulled rank. They moved the sphere from the lander to a cave nestled high in the nearby mountains, secure, shielded. But when they lifted the sphere, a strange, viscous substance was left behind, like the residue of something alive. They didn't dwell on it. Time was short, and they had a world to transform. Stephen launched the sphere deep inside the mountain. The structure pulsed, releasing energy like a heartbeat. It was alive and working. Back on the mothership, Richard reviewed the airlock again. The same sticky goo was spreading. And then he found something, a small portable camera lodged in a corner of the engine room. He played the footage. On it, Peter could be seen entering the airlock, trying to prove he hadn't made a mistake with the warp jump. Then something attacked. A dark, crawling shape emerged from the shadows fluid, fast, silent. The feed cut out as Peter screamed. Richard called the team on the surface and shared what he'd found. They gathered around a monitor inside the lander as he played the footage. No one spoke. The creature had emerged from the sphere. Leona named it the Trojan. It had come hidden inside the device, like warriors inside a wooden horse. Richard confirmed that the Trojan made it to the planet with them. It was alive, intelligent, and possibly responsible for rerouting their warp jump. The situation worsened. David noticed something else. The sphere was terraforming, but not in the way they programmed it. It was working on its own, making changes no one understood. When Stephen said they had to intervene, Ryan shut him down. "You're not in charge anymore." Richard had more footage, this one of Stephen on Earth, inside the cave, encountering something no one else had seen. An unexplainable being. Stephen had kept this encounter to himself. Ryan accused him of hiding critical information, of playing God, of getting Peter killed. Stephen didn't respond. He just left. He returned to the cave against orders, intent on resetting the sphere. David followed. At first, he refused to help, but Stephen knew his weakness. "Your daughter, Rita, this virus is killing everyone. We can't let her death mean nothing." At the sphere, green life began to sprout across the cave walls. The transformation had begun. But David noticed something moving. The Trojan was coming. He shouted at Stephen to leave. Stephen refused. David fired a warning shot into the air. When that didn't work, he shot the sphere. A chunk flew off. Stephen turned on him, gun raised. The Trojan attacked. The two barely escaped, sprinting back to the lander as the cave shook behind them. Inside, Stephen warned David, "Threaten the mission again and I'll end it myself." Before David could respond, Ryan punched Stephen to the floor. Then the alarm went off. The hull had been breached. Leona woke to the sound and ran through the corridors. Goo covered the walls. Something slithered in the dark. A soldier guided her towards the escape path, but was taken by the Trojan mid-step. Leona barely made it to the control room alive. There, the crew made a plan. The Trojan was inside. It had used the weakest part of the hull to enter. It wasn't just alive, it was thinking. They would lure it out and kill it. Stephen would be the bait. The plan was simple. Draw the Trojan to the lander's rear boosters and ignite them. Leona would open the airlocks. Stephen would run. Timing had to be perfect, but it wasn't. The engines failed. Leona left her post to distract the Trojan herself. When the engines roared to life, she was still standing in front of them. She was vaporized. Her sacrifice bought them seconds. Stephen and David sealed themselves inside, but not before slicing off part of the Trojan in the door. Stephen ran tests on the fragment. It wasn't organic. It was synthetic, crafted from the same alien material as the sphere. A bio-robot. And David, who'd been injured in the last attack, was showing signs of infection. But the bacteria in his wound was different, unique. It held something, the potential for a cure. Stephen remembered something else. The being he encountered near the sphere, the one from Earth, it had created an electromagnetic disruption. The same disruption now came from the Trojan fragment. It wasn't a ghost or a vision. The being had been real, and Stephen had seen it before. Ryan found him and placed him under arrest. "You want to be the savior," Ryan said, "but all you do is get people killed." Stephen said nothing. Instead, he asked Richard for something. "Remap the stars. Adjust the solar system backwards, 4 billion years. Use the position of celestial bodies, track their drift." The system that emerged was unmistakable. They hadn't traveled across space. They had traveled through time. The blue planet wasn't new. It was Earth. The chunk that flew off the sphere when David shot it, it matched perfectly the piece Stephen had shaped into a bracelet and given to Amy. This sphere, the one they found on Earth, wasn't a replica. It was the same one. Time was a loop. The Trojan came from Earth's past, not its future. David's infection was getting worse. Time was running out. Stephen encoded a message in the bracelet, one Amy would only find if water activated the material. It was a command, a way to communicate through time using the sphere, a way to tell her how to cure the virus. Ryan, unaware of this, prepared to destroy the sphere entirely. He planted bombs in the cave, determined to end the Trojan once and for all. Stephen begged him to wait. There was a better plan. Lure the Trojan to the lander again, trap it inside, and detonate there. Ryan reluctantly agreed, but then David snapped. Infected and delusional, he picked up a gun. "If I end it now," he shouted, "none of this happens. Rita doesn't suffer. None of us are born." Stephen tried to stop him. David opened fire. The Trojan returned. In the chaos, it killed David. Stephen escaped, sprinting through smoke and fire. He reached the cave, oxygen nearly gone, vision blurring. He looked up, hoping she got the message, hoping she'd come. The wind howled through the ancient cave. Stephen staggered forward, lungs aching, vision blurred by blood and smoke. His suit's oxygen warning blinked red, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He was alone, surrounded by walls that hadn't felt the weight of life in billions of years. And still he waited. Outside, the planet stirred, not with animals or voices, but with the primal breath of something being born. The sphere's terraforming pulse vibrated deep underground, reshaping a world that had yet to know humanity. Somewhere in that pulse, the Trojan had died, and David, once friend, once father, had died too, consumed by the same grief that had driven Stephen across stars and time. The mission had succeeded, and yet Stephen had nothing. No crew, no ship, no way home. Just one last hope, that a message hidden in a bracelet would cross the void he could not. Rain fell. For the first time in this world's history, it rained. Billions of years later, Amy stood in a desolate field, the sky still wounded from the virus above. Drops of rain slid across her hand. She looked down. The bracelet Stephen had given her shimmered, once dull, now glowing faintly. Etched lines appeared beneath the water's touch. A message. She froze, then ran. She reached the cave, breathless, soaked, clutching the bracelet like a lifeline. The symbols glowed brighter. She whispered the command, and he was there. Stephen stood in front of her, not quite solid, not quite distant. A projection through time, but real enough to see the tears in her eyes, real enough to feel the ache in his chest split open. "You got it," he said, barely above a whisper. Amy stepped forward, trying to memorize every line of his face. "I got it, and I'm here." Stephen handed her a data pad, his hands shaking. This is it. The bacteria. It's in David's infection. It's the key. You can synthesize it. Create the vaccine." Amy stared at it like salvation. "You have to do this," Stephen said. "For Rita. For everyone. For our son," Amy added. He looked at her, stunned. "I didn't get to tell you. Before you left, I was pregnant." Silence. Then a slow smile broke across his face. It trembled, caught somewhere between joy and agony. "I'm sorry I left," he said. "I thought I had to save the world. I didn't know the world was right there in front of me." Amy reached out. He did too. Their fingers didn't quite touch, but it was enough. Enough to remember. Enough to believe. "I love you," Stephen said. "Always. In every version of time." And then he was gone. Amy stood alone in the cave, the data pad clutched to her chest, the bracelet now dark. But her tears were no longer just grief. They were fuel. She returned to the lab and built the vaccine. It worked. Slowly, miraculously, Earth healed. The forests grew again. The air thickened with oxygen. The planet breathed. Years passed. One morning in a quiet park, Amy walked beneath a sky reborn. Her son giggled in his stroller, reaching for sunlight between tree branches. She smiled down at him. Stephen's eyes, her hands, alive. She didn't tell him the whole story, not yet. But one day she would, because his life had already spanned more than time. It had rewritten it. And somewhere, buried deep in the beginning of everything, the man who had risked it all still stood in that cave, waiting, watching, knowing that the message had made it home.